Hide inside. Do not make a sound. Trust me. Those were the last words Elena whispered before she shoved me into the cramped velvet fitting room and slid the lock shut. I stood there in the dark, clutching my half-buttoned dress shirt, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I am Douglas Bennett. I am 68 years old. I spent 30 years hunting down financial criminals for the government, but nothing in my career prepared me for what I was about to hear through that thin partition wall. 10 minutes later, the voices on the other side froze the blood in my veins. It was Brandon, the man who was supposed to marry my daughter Mallory in 3 days. And he was not alone. The woman laughing with him was not my daughter. It was Tanya, Mallory's maid of honor and best friend since the 3rd grade. What they said next did not just break my heart. It declared war. Before I tell you how I destroyed them without throwing a single punch, let me know where you are listening from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect your family from a wolf in sheep's clothing. My name is Doug. To the world, I am just a retired widower living in a quiet suburb of Seattle. People see the gray hair, the reading glasses, and the slow walk, and they assume I am harmless. They assume I am fading away. My daughter Mallory treats me like fragile glass. She worries about my blood pressure. She worries about my memory. She loves me, but she thinks my time is over. Brandon thinks I am already dead. He just needs to wait for the body to stop moving. That afternoon at Elena's bridal shop was supposed to be routine. I was there for a final fitting of my tuxedo. Elena has run this shop for 40 years. She knows every secret in this town because people think bridal shops are confessionals. When she saw Brandon's car pull up outside, she did not greet him. She hid me. I pressed my ear against the cool mirror of the fitting room. The front door chime rang. Heavy footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. Finally alone, Brandon's voice boomed. It lacked the polite, soft tone he used at our Sunday dinners. It was sharp, arrogant. "Are you sure the old man isn't here?" Tanya asked. Her voice was muffled, likely buried in his shoulder. Elena said he canceled. "The place is empty. Relax." Brandon sounded dismissive. I heard the rustle of fabric, the sound of a zipper. My stomach turned. This was the man Mallory stayed up nights writing vows for. This was the man I was paying $50,000 to host a wedding for. But the betrayal of the flesh was nothing compared to the betrayal of the soul that followed. "So is everything set for Monday?" Tanya asked. The tone shifted from lust to business. "Done and dusted," Brandon replied. I could hear the smirk in his voice. "As soon as I say I do, I gain power of attorney. I have been working on Mallory for months. She is convinced Doug is losing his mind. She thinks he is forgetting to pay bills. She thinks he is leaving the stove on." I gripped the velvet curtain so hard, my knuckles turned white. I had never left the stove on. The gas bill I supposedly missed last month was autopay. I had checked it 3 times, confused. Now I knew why. Gaslighting. He was gaslighting my daughter into believing her father was senile. "Dr. Meyer signed the assessment this morning," Brandon continued. "For $5,000, that quack would diagnose the Pope with dementia. The paperwork declares Doug mentally incompetent to manage his estate. Once we are married, I become the primary male guardian since Mallory is too emotional to handle the hard decisions." "What about the house?" Tanya asked. "Prime real estate. I already have a buyer lined up. We close the deal next Friday. We put Doug in Sunset Manor on the state subsidy plan. It is a dump, but it is free. He won't know the difference. He will be too medicated to care. Sunset Manor. The facility the state shut down twice for health code violations. The place where patients were found tied to beds with bed sores. He was not just stealing my money. He was sentencing me to a slow, painful death. And the money Tanya pressed. The crypto debt is huge, babe, but Doug's portfolio covers it. We sell the house, liquidate his 401k, and cash out the life insurance policy my mom took out on him years ago. We will be debt-free and rich by the time we get back from the honeymoon. Mallory will never know. She will think Daddy just made some bad investments before he lost his marbles. I stopped breathing. My vision blurred. I wanted to kick that door down. I wanted to wrap my hands around his throat and squeeze until the arrogance drained out of his eyes. I imagined dragging him out to the street and exposing him to the world. But I didn't. Years of forensic accounting taught me one thing. Anger is a liability. Patience is a weapon. If I confronted him now, it would be my word against his. He had a crooked doctor. He had my daughter's trust. He would spin this. He would say I was hallucinating. He would say I was confused. Mallory would look at me with those pitying eyes and believe him because she wanted to believe him. I needed more than violence. I needed evidence. I needed to let him think he had won. We should go, Tanya said after a moment. Mallory is expecting me for cake tasting. Right. Kiss me first. The sounds that followed made bile rise in my throat. Then the door chime rang again. They were gone. Elena opened the fitting room door. Her face was pale. She had heard everything from the counter. She looked at me expecting a broken old man. She expected tears. I stepped out. I buttoned my shirt. My hands were steady. Did you hear them? Elena asked softly. Every word, I replied. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was not the voice of Doug the retiree. It was the voice of Agent Bennett. I can tell Mallory. I can be your witness, Elena offered. No. I shook my head. Mallory is in love. Denial is a powerful drug. If we tell her now, she will confront him. He will lie. He will talk his way out of it. He will say we are conspiring against their happiness. I need to cut the head off the snake, not just poke it. I walked out of the shop into the gray Seattle afternoon. The rain felt cold on my face, waking me up from the slumber I had been in since my wife died. I had been sleepwalking through life, trusting people, believing that if I was good, the world would be good to me. That naivety died in the fitting room. I got into my sedan and sat in silence for a moment. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The wrinkles were there. The age spots were there. But the eyes were different. The soft grandfatherly warmth was gone. In its place was the cold, calculating stare of a man who used to tear apart billion-dollar fraud schemes for breakfast. I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. I needed to see how deep the rot went. Password invalid. I frowned. I typed it again. My birthday. My wife's birthday. Access denied. Account locked due to suspicious activity. Contact administrator. He was fast. He was faster than I thought. He had not just planned this. He had already started the execution. He must have accessed my phone when I was sleeping, or guessed the security questions using information Mallory innocently gave him. I drove home. My house, the one I bought 30 years ago, the one where I raised my daughter, suddenly felt like a crime scene. I walked into my study. I opened the wall safe behind the painting of the chaotic ocean storm my wife loved. Empty. The deed to the house. My passport. The physical stock certificates. Gone. He had raided me. He had stripped me clean before the wedding bells even rang. Most men would panic. Most men would call the police screaming. But I knew the law. Without proof of theft, this was a civil dispute. He would claim I gave them to him for safekeeping. He would claim I was forgetful. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hand did not shake. I took a sip. Brandon Cole thought he was playing chess with a senile old man. He thought I was a pawn to be sacrificed for his queen. He did not realize he had just sat down across from a grandmaster. He wanted a senile father-in-law. Fine. I would give him the performance of a lifetime. I would be the most confused, helpless, trembling old man he ever saw. I would make him overconfident. I would make him reckless. And while he was busy laughing at my decline, I would be tightening the noose around his neck. I looked at the calendar on the fridge. 3 days to the wedding. 3 days to build a trap that would not just stop a marriage but end a criminal career. I took out my burner phone, a habit from the old days I never quite shook. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. Patricia O'Connell, the most ruthless estate attorney in the state. She answered on the second ring. "Hello," Patricia asked, her voice sharp. "Patty, it's Doug," I said. "Doug Bennett. I haven't heard from you since the funeral." "Everything okay?" "No," I said, looking at the empty spot on the wall where my safe was hidden. "I need you to open a file." "What kind of file?" "Forensic audit. And I need you to draft a document. A shadow trust." She paused. "A shadow trust, Doug, that is aggressive. Who is the target? My future son-in-law." I hung up. The game had begun. Brandon wanted my life. He was about to find out that some victims bite back. But first I had to survive dinner. I heard the front door open. Mallory's voice floated down the hall, cheerful and light. "Dad." "We're home." Brandon brought pizza. I looked at the kitchen counter. I saw a bottle of wine. I grabbed it. I poured some on my shirt. I messed up my hair. I let my jaw go slack. It was time to go on stage. I shuffled into the living room, dragging my feet. "Who is there?" I asked, squinting my eyes, making my voice tremble. "Is that you, Martha?" Martha was my dead wife. I saw Brandon exchange a look with Mallory. He smirked. It was a small, quick twist of his lips, but I saw it. He thought he had already won. "Oh, Dad." Mallory sighed, rushing over to help me. "Mom isn't here. It's me." Mallory. And Brandon, who I asked, looking straight at the wolf in my living room. "Brandon, Dad, your future son-in-law." I looked at him. I let my eyes glaze over. "Nice to meet you, young man," I said. Brandon stepped forward and patted my shoulder. His touch made my skin crawl. "Hey, Doug. Don't worry. We are going to take good care of you. Real good care." I smiled back, a vacant, empty smile. "I am sure you will," I said. I sat down at the table. They began to eat. I watched them. I watched how he touched her hand, reassuring her while he stole her future. I watched how she looked at him with adoration, completely blind to the knife he was holding behind his back. I waited. I needed him to make a mistake. I needed him to feel so safe that he would get sloppy. And then it happened. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, then flipped it face down. But the glass surface of the dining table was reflective. I adjusted my glasses. I leaned in, pretending to reach for the salt. I saw the reflection of the message. It was from a contact named Shark. The text read, 200,000 by Monday, or the girl gets it. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about debt. This wasn't just about greed. My daughter was in physical danger. The crypto debt he mentioned to Tanya wasn't to a bank. It was to loan sharks. If he didn't get my money by Monday, he wouldn't just be broke. He would be dead. And if he was dead, they might come for his wife. I looked at Mallory. She was laughing at something he said. She had no idea she was sitting next to a walking corpse. I had to accelerate the plan. I couldn't wait for the wedding. I had to destroy him, and I had to do it now. But I needed more than a text message. I needed the paper trail. I needed to know exactly who he owed and where the money was going. I stood up, knocking my chair over on purpose. Dad, Mallory jumped up. I need to go to the bathroom, I mumbled. I shuffled down the hall. But I didn't go to the bathroom. I went to the guest room where Brandon had thrown his jacket. I checked the pockets. Nothing. I checked the lining. I felt something hard. A second phone. I pulled it out. It was locked, but the screen lit up with a notification. It was an email preview from Dr. Meyer. Subject capacity assessment, finalized, body. The hard copies are ready. I backdated them to last month as requested. This should hold up in court if the old man tries to fight the conservatorship. Just bring the cash tomorrow. I took a photo of the screen with my burner phone. This was the first nail in his coffin. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Medical malpractice. I heard footsteps in the hall. Dad Brandon's voice. He wasn't sounding polite anymore. He sounded suspicious. I quickly shoved the phone back into his jacket. I flushed the toilet in the bathroom next door and stepped out, looking confused. Where am I asked. Brandon stared at me. His eyes narrowed. He was looking for a crack in my mask. He was looking for the sharp agent I used to be. You are in the hallway, Doug, he said slowly. You got lost again. Oh, I said. I want to go home. You are home, Doug. Not for long, he whispered so low Mallory couldn't hear from the dining room. I looked him in the eye. For a split second, I wanted to drop the act. I wanted to tell him that he was the one who was lost. Instead, I leaned in and whispered back. Who are you again? He laughed. A cold, cruel sound. I am the guy who owns you, Doug. Now go eat your soup. He turned his back on me and walked away. That was his mistake. You never turn your back on a hunter. I returned to the table. I ate my soup. I watched them plan the seating chart for the wedding. They were rearranging the Titanic's deck chairs, unaware they had already hit the iceberg. Tomorrow I would meet Patricia. We would trace the money. We would find Shark. And we would turn Brandon's trap against him. But I didn't know that the next morning Mallory would deliver the blow that almost broke me. She would hand me a pen and ask me to sign away my life, looking at me with tears in her eyes, convinced she was saving me. That is what hurts the most. The villain uses your love against you. I finished my dinner. The soup tasted like ash. I looked at Brandon. Enjoy it, son. This is the last peaceful meal you will ever eat. Because when Monday comes, you won't be saying, I do. You will be pleading the fifth. I sat at the head of the mahogany dining table, the same spot I had occupied for 30 years. To my left sat Mallory, glowing with the naive radiance of a bride-to-be. To my right sat Brandon, the man plotting to dismantle my life, brick by brick. The roast chicken in the center of the table smelled of rosemary and lemon, a comfort scent that tonight felt nauseatingly deceptive. This was not a family dinner. It was an interrogation room, and I was the only one who knew the recording was running. I looked at my hands. They were steady, strong hands that had sifted through thousands of pages of fraudulent ledgers in my career. But tonight, they had to be weak. They had to betray me. I took a deep breath, mentally disengaging the muscles in my forearm, forcing a tremor into my fingers. It was a technique I had seen con artists use to garner sympathy in court, and now I was using it to survive in my own home. Mallory, pass the potatoes, please, Brandon said, flashing that white, perfect smile that probably cost as much as my first car. He looked at me, his eyes devoid of warmth. You doing okay there, Doug? You have been staring at that fork for 5 minutes. I blinked rapidly, feigning confusion. I looked from the fork to him, then to the ceiling, letting my mouth hang open slightly. It was a subtle performance, the kind that whispers decline rather than shouting it. Who are you asking? I mumbled, my voice raspy. Mallory stopped mid-chew. She put her hand on my arm, her touch gentle and terrified. Dad, it is Brandon. You know Brandon. You guys played golf last Sunday. I squinted at him. The wolf in the polo shirt. Brandon, I repeated, testing the word as if it were a foreign coin. Right. The golf man. Did we win? Brandon chuckled, but the sound was dry. No, Doug. You drove the cart into a sand trap. Remember, we had to get the marshal to tow us out. He was lying. I had never driven a cart into a sand trap in my life. I was a scratch golfer. He was rewriting history in real time, planting false memories in Mallory's head to reinforce the narrative of my incompetence. I saw Mallory bite her lip, a flicker of shame crossing her face. She believed him. Of course she did. Why would her fiancé lie about something so trivial? I decided to give him exactly what he wanted. I reached for my wine glass, a delicate crystal stemware that had belonged to my mother. I gripped it, then deliberately relaxed my fingers. Just as I lifted it off the coaster, the glass tipped. Red wine, dark as arterial blood, flooded across the white lace tablecloth. It splashed onto the roast chicken. It dripped onto the expensive hardwood floor. Dad, Mallory cried out, jumping up and grabbing a napkin. I sat frozen, letting my hands hover in the air, trembling violently now. Oh no, I stammered. Oh dear. Look at what I did. The blood. Is that blood? It is wine, Dad, Mallory said, her voice cracking. It is just wine. Brandon didn't move to help. He sat back, crossing his arms, watching the chaos with the satisfied detachment of a scientist observing a lab rat fail a maze. I saw the look he shot Mallory. It was a look that said, "See, I told you. He is too far gone." I am so sorry, I whined, playing the part of the pathetic, broken old man to the hilt. I thought it was the water. My eyes, they aren't working right today. It is okay, Doug. Brandon said, his voice dripping with condescension. We know it is not your fault. You just need a little more help these days, right? Maybe a smaller cup next time. A sippy cup. He laughed. He actually laughed. It was a small, quiet snort, but I heard it. He was mocking me in my own house over the mess he had psychologically engineered. Mallory was on her knees, scrubbing the floor. Let me help you, sweetie, I said, starting to push my chair back. No. Brandon snapped. His voice was too loud, too sharp. He caught himself instantly and lowered his tone, putting a hand on my shoulder to push me back down. His grip was hard, painful. It was a restraint, not a comfort. Just sit there, Doug. You will only make it worse. Let the professionals handle it. Or in this case, your daughter. I looked at his hand on my shoulder. I wanted to grab his wrist and twist it until the tendons snapped. I knew exactly how to do it. A self-defense instructor at the bureau had taught me 20 years ago. But I forced my muscles to remain limp. I looked down at my lap, playing the shamed child. You are a good boy, Thomas, I said softly. The table went silent. Who? Brandon asked, his eyes narrowing. Thomas, I said, looking him dead in the eye with a vacant stare. You remind me of my cousin, Thomas. He stole a car and went to prison in '92. Brandon's jaw tightened. The insult landed. He knew I was comparing him to a criminal, but he couldn't get angry because to him I was just a senile old fool rambling. My name is Brandon, he gritted out. Right, I said, picking up my fork and stabbing a potato with unnecessary force. Brandon, the one with the debts. The air left the room. Even Mallory stopped scrubbing and looked up. What did you say? Dad, she asked. I blinked, looking around innocently. I said, the one with the nets, does he like fishing? I swear I saw a fishing net in his trunk. Brandon exhaled a long, shaky breath. He glared at me, trying to decipher if that was a slip of the tongue or a shot across the bow. I chewed my potato slowly, letting the silence stretch, letting his paranoia germinate. That was the beauty of this disguise. I could say anything, reveal anything, and if I backed it up with a confused smile, it was just Dad having an episode. Suddenly a vibration hummed against the wood of the table. Brandon's phone. He had placed it face down next to his plate, a habit of men who have things to hide. He glanced at Mallory, who was busy rinsing the wine-stained napkin in the kitchen sink. Seeing the coast was clear, he picked up the phone, keeping it below the table edge, shielded by his napkin. He thought he was invisible. He thought I was blind. But I spent 3 decades tracking illicit funds through shell companies and offshore accounts. I didn't look at the phone. I looked at the sliding glass door behind him. The night outside was pitch black, turning the glass into a perfect mirror. I adjusted my glasses, squinting as if I was trying to focus on a painting on the wall, but my focus was razor sharp on the reflection over his left shoulder. I saw the glow of the screen. I saw the green bubble of a text message, and I saw the words that confirmed my worst fears. Shark, you're stalling. The interest just doubled. Monday is the deadline. If the wire isn't in my account by noon, we visit the bride. We visit the bride. My heart hammered against my ribs, a cold, heavy thud. This wasn't just a scam. This wasn't just a con artist trying to steal a house. This was a man who had borrowed money from violent criminals and used my daughter as collateral. If he didn't get control of my assets by Monday, if he didn't liquidate my life savings to pay them off, they weren't coming for him. They were coming for Mallory. I watched Brandon type a reply. His thumbs moved furiously. Relax. The old man is practically a vegetable. I am getting the power of attorney signed tomorrow morning. You will have your money. He hit send and slid the phone back into his pocket. He looked up and caught me staring. For a second, panic flickered in his eyes. He wondered how long I had been looking. He wondered what I had seen. Then he looked at my drooling mouth, my slumped shoulders, and the wine stain on my shirt. The panic vanished, replaced by arrogance. "What are you looking at, Doug?" he asked. I smiled. A slow, sad smile. "I was just thinking about the wedding," I said. "It is going to be a day to remember." "It sure is," Brandon said, picking up his wine glass and raising it in a mock toast to me. "To new beginnings." "To justice," I whispered so low, he couldn't hear. Mallory came back to the table, her eyes red-rimmed. She forced a smile, trying to salvage the ruined dinner. "I am back. Everything is clean." "Dad, are you done eating?" I pushed my plate away. "I am not hungry, sweetie. I think I need to go lie down. My head is spinning." "Let me help you up," Brandon offered, playing the hero again. "Don't touch me," I snapped. The sharpness in my voice surprised them both. I quickly covered it with a whimper, clutching my chest. "I am sore. My ribs hurt. I can walk. I just need to walk." I shuffled out of the dining room, leaning heavily on the wall for support. I heard them whispering behind me as I climbed the stairs. "See, Mallory, he is getting aggressive. That is the next stage of dementia. The mood swings. We need to get that paperwork signed tomorrow for his own safety." "I know, Brandon. I know. It is so hard to watch him like this. It is for the best, babe. We are doing this because we love him." I reached the top of the stairs and turned the corner out of their sight. I straightened my back. The tremor in my hands vanished. I walked silently into my study and locked the door. I didn't turn on the light. I went straight to the window and looked down at the driveway. Brandon's car was there, a flashy leased BMW that he couldn't afford. I pulled out my burner phone. I had the confirmation I needed. The threat was immediate. Shark was likely a pseudonym for a local loan shark operation. I needed to identify them. I needed to know exactly who was holding the leash. I dialed Patricia. "Did you get the trace?" I asked without preamble. "I am looking at it now." "Doug," Patricia's voice came through crisp and professional. "You were right. Brandon Cole is a ghost. No employment history for the last 3 years. But his credit card statements, It is a horror show. Online gambling, high-stakes poker rooms in the underground district, and there is a recurring payment to a shell company called Viper Logistics. Viper Logistics, I repeated. That is the front for the Russo crime family. You know them. I arrested the father in '98, I said. If he is borrowing from the Russos, he is not just in debt. He is owned. Patricia, they threatened Mallory. I saw a text. There was a silence on the line. Then the sound of typing. That changes the strategy, Doug. We can't just sue him. If we corner him, he might panic and do something violent. Or the Russos might decide to collect on the insurance policy early. I know I said, watching Brandon walk out of the house below to smoke a cigarette. He looked agitated. He was pacing. So what is the play? We call the cops, no, I said. The cops will take 48 hours to file a report. By then the wedding is over. We need to sever the head. I need to make the Russos believe that Brandon is not their payday. I need to make them believe he is a liability. How do you do that? I am going to make him insolvent, I said. Publicly. Irreversibly. But first, I need to survive tomorrow. He is bringing the power of attorney papers in the morning. Are you going to sign? I have to, I said. If I don't, he cancels the wedding, grabs Mallory and runs. Or worse, the Russos come for her. I need him to think he has won until the very last second. I need him to walk down that aisle thinking he is a king, so when I strip him of his crown, he has nowhere to hide. I hung up. I watched Brandon flick his cigarette butt onto my driveway, my property. He looked up at my window. I stepped back into the shadows, but I kept my eyes on him. You want my life, Brandon. You want my daughter. You can have my signature. You can have my act. But you have no idea what you just invited into your life. You think you are the predator because you found a weak old sheep. You forgot that sometimes the shepherd is the one with the rifle. I went to my desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I began to write down everything I had seen, every time, every date, every text. My memory wasn't failing. It was a steel trap. And tomorrow I was going to bait it with the one thing Brandon couldn't resist: total control. I would sign his papers. I would play his game. And I would wait for the wedding reception to turn the lights on. Monday is coming, Brandon. And so am I. The rain in Seattle does not wash the city clean. It just makes the grime slicker. It was 5 in the morning on Friday, the kind of hour when only bakers, cops, and criminals are awake. I sat in a booth at the back of Joe's Diner, a place that smelled of stale coffee and decades of fried bacon. This was not the kind of place Brandon Cole would ever step foot in. There were no mimosas here. There was no avocado toast. There was only anonymity. I wore a baseball cap pulled low and a windbreaker that had seen better days. To the waitress, I was just another retiree avoiding an empty house. She poured me a cup of black coffee without asking. I watched the steam rise, my mind racing through the events of last night. The wine spill. The text message. The threat. The bell above the door jingled. Patricia O'Connell walked in. She did not look like a woman who had spent the last 20 years tearing apart the estates of the corrupt elite. She wore a gray raincoat and carried a battered leather briefcase that was worth more than the car parked outside. She saw me. She did not smile. We do not do smiles. We survived the trenches of federal investigations together in the 90s. We deal in facts, not pleasantries. She slid into the booth opposite me. She placed the briefcase on the table and signaled the waitress for coffee. You look like hell, Doug, she said. Her voice was gravel and silk. I feel like it, I replied. Did you bring the hardware? Patricia tapped the briefcase. I have everything. But before we open this Pandora's box, I need you to answer one question. Are you doing this to save your money, or are you doing this to destroy him? I looked her in the eye. The image of Brandon's hand on my shoulder, his condescending smirk flashed in my mind. I am doing this because he threatened Mallory, I said. He is using my daughter as a human shield against the mob. Patricia nodded. Good answer. Because what I found last night is not just fraud. It is a death wish. She opened the briefcase. Inside was a ruggedized laptop, the kind we used to use for field audits. She booted it up. The screen glowed blue, illuminating the lines of worry on her face. Let's start with the surface, she said, typing furiously. Brandon claims to be the CEO of Apex Horizon Solutions, a tech startup specializing in blockchain logistics. Sounds impressive to a layman. Sounds like the future. She spun the laptop around to face me. I put on my reading glasses. I wasn't looking at a marketing brochure. I was looking at the corporate filing structure. It is a shell, I said, pointing at the screen. Look at the registered agent. It is a P.O. box in Delaware. There is no office. There are no employees. It gets better, Patricia said. I ran a cross-reference on his supposed investors. He claims to have raised $3 million in seed funding. Look at the names of the investors. I scrolled down the list. Jupiter Holdings, Blue Sky Ventures, Ocean Deep LLC. I recognize these names, I whispered. My pulse began to quicken. It was the thrill of the hunt, the familiar rush of connecting the dots. These are layering companies. They are used to wash money. They take dirty cash, cycle it through a maze of fake loans, and spit it out as clean investment capital. Exactly, Patricia said. But here is the twist. Brandon isn't the one washing the money. He is the one stealing it. She opened a spreadsheet. It was a forensic reconstruction of Brandon's bank accounts. It was a sea of red ink. He is running a classic Ponzi scheme, but a sloppy one, Patricia explained, tracing the lines on the screen with her manicured finger. He takes money from new investors, friends, college buddies, maybe even some of Mallory's coworkers, and he promises them a 20% return in a month. When the month is up, he needs to pay them, but he has no product. He has no profit, so he needs a new victim. And I am the new victim, I said, the realization settling in my stomach like a stone. You are the whale, Doug. You are the bailout. Patricia looked at me with grim sympathy. He owes $1.8 million to the early investors who are demanding their payout. He has been stalling them for weeks. That is why he needs your house. That is why he needs your retirement fund. He isn't planning to invest your money. He is planning to earn it, to keep the fire from consuming him. I looked at the numbers. They were staggering. He had burned through $500,000 in 6 months on lifestyle expenses alone. Leased luxury cars, first-class flights, jewelry, and the gambling. Show me the gambling, I said. Patricia clicked another tab. This is where it gets dangerous. The screen showed a series of wire transfers to a company called Viper Logistics. 10,000, 50,000, 200,000. The dates coincided with major sporting events. The Super Bowl, the NBA Finals. He is a degenerate, I said. He is betting on everything, and he is losing. But Viper Logistics isn't a casino, Patricia said. Do you know who owns the domain for Viper Logistics? I didn't need to check the database. I knew the name from my old case files. Tony the Hammer Russo, I said. The Russo crime family. They run the biggest illegal bookmaking operation on the West Coast. Patricia nodded. Brandon didn't just borrow from a bank, Doug. He borrowed from the kind of people who break kneecaps as a warning and put bullets in heads as a final notice. That text you saw last night about the bride. That wasn't a figure of speech. I leaned back in the booth. The diner noise faded away. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. My daughter was sleeping next to a man who had effectively sold a stake in her life to the mafia. If he didn't pay up, they wouldn't just hurt him. They would hurt her to send a message. He needs $2 million by Monday, I said. That is the payoff. And your estate is valued at roughly $2.2 million, Patricia noted. It fits perfectly. He liquidates everything you own, pays off the Russos, and walks away clean. Mallory is left with a penniless father and a husband who claims it was just bad luck in the market. I took a sip of the cold coffee. It tasted bitter like the truth. We can't go to the police, I said. Why not? Patricia asked. We have evidence of fraud. If we arrest him now, the Russos don't get paid, I explained. They will think Brandon snitched. They will think he tried to run. They might come after Mallory for retribution. Or worse, Brandon panics and takes Mallory hostage. I know guys like him. He is a coward. A cornered coward is the most dangerous animal on earth. So what is the play? Patricia asked. She closed the laptop. She knew me. She knew I already had a plan forming. We need to cut the cord, I said. We need to make Brandon toxic. I need the Russos to believe that Brandon has no access to money. I need them to believe that he lied to them about me. I don't follow. If I sign that power of attorney today, Brandon thinks he has the money. He tells the Russos he has the money. The Russos relax. They wait for Monday. Right. But what happens if that power of attorney is worthless? What happens if the money he thinks he is grabbing is already gone? Patricia's eyes widened. She smiled. A sharp, predatory smile. The shadow trust, she said. Exactly, I said. We transfer ownership of everything, the house, the accounts, the stocks, into the irrevocable trust we talked about. We do it today. We backdate the intent to last week so it holds up. When Brandon tries to access the funds on Monday, the bank locks him out. And the Russos, they will see a liar who promised them gold and delivered dust. They won't come for Mallory. They will realize she is worthless to them. They will handle Brandon themselves. It is risky, Doug. You are playing chicken with a hitman. I have played with worse, I said. But I need one more thing. I need to nail him for the medical fraud. I need to make sure that when the dust settles, he goes to federal prison for a long time so he can never come back for her. The doctor, Patricia said. Meyer, I need his financials. If he took a bribe to declare me incompetent. He left a trail. Patricia opened the laptop again. Give me 10 minutes. Doctors are arrogant. They think they are smarter than the IRS. They never are. We sat in silence as she worked. I watched the rain streak against the window. I thought about Mallory. I thought about the time she fell off her bike when she was 7. I picked her up, cleaned her scraped knees, and told her that pain was just a lesson in gravity. This was going to be the hardest lesson of her life. But I had to be the one to let her fall so I could be the one to pick her up. Got him, Patricia said. I looked at the screen. Dr. Alan Meyer. A deposit of $5,000 in his personal account yesterday. The source, an ATM cash deposit. Sloppy, I said. But look at the withdrawal location, Patricia pointed out. The cash was withdrawn from an ATM inside the casino where Brandon plays. The timestamps match. Brandon took cash from his credit card cash advance, walked 2 blocks, and deposited it into Meyer's account. We have them on camera. That is conspiracy, I said. That is federal. We have enough to bury them all, Doug. Brandon. Tanya. Dr. Meyer. Good, I said. Print it. All of it. I stood up. I threw a $20 bill on the table. Where are you going? Patricia asked. I am going home, I said. I have a performance to finish. I have to go sign my life away. Patricia grabbed my arm. Her grip was strong. Be careful, Doug. Brandon is desperate. If he suspects you know, if he thinks for 1 second that the old man is faking it. I adjusted my cap. I pulled my collar up. Brandon thinks he is the shark, I said. He forgot that the shark is just fish food for the orca. I walked out into the rain. The cold water felt good. It felt like armor. I got into my car and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Mallory. 1 text from Brandon. Where are you, Doug? We have the notary coming in an hour. Don't be late. I typed a reply with clumsy fingers, making sure to add a typo. Coming home. Forgot to buy milk. I stared at the send button. This was the point of no return. Once I walked back into that house, I was unarmed in a den of thieves. But I had something they didn't have. I had the truth. And I had the absolute unwavering resolve of a father who would burn the world down to save his child. I started the engine. The radio played a soft jazz tune. I turned it off. I needed silence. I needed focus. I drove back to the house that was no longer a home. It was a battlefield, and I was ready to surrender just so I could ambush them when they started counting the spoils. I pulled into the driveway. Brandon's BMW was there. The notary's car was there. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face go slack. I stepped out of the car, shuffling my feet on the wet pavement. Showtime. The house was quiet when I returned from the diner, but it was the silence of a held breath. It was Friday evening. The wedding rehearsal was scheduled for tomorrow morning. I walked up the stairs, the banister feeling cold under my hand. I passed the guest room where Brandon was presumably sleeping, or more likely texting his loan sharks. The door was shut. I continued down the hall to Mallory's old room. The door was ajar. Inside, my daughter was sitting on the floor, surrounded by open suitcases. She was folding bikinis and sundresses, packing for a honeymoon in the Maldives that I was paying for with money Brandon believed he had already stolen. I watched her for a moment. She looked exhausted. The glowing happy bride I had seen in photos was gone. In her place was a woman with dark circles under her eyes and a nervous tremor in her hands. She was folding the same dress over and over again, her mind clearly somewhere else. Brandon was not just stealing her inheritance, he was draining her spirit. I knocked softly on the doorframe. Mallory jumped, clutching the dress to her chest. She looked at me, and for a split second I saw fear. She was afraid of her own father. She was afraid I would say something embarrassing, or break something, or forget who she was. "Hey, Dad," she exhaled, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You scared me." "Where have you been?" "Brandon said you went out for milk hours ago." I walked into the room. It still smelled like the vanilla candles she used to burn in high school. The walls were still painted the soft lavender she chose when she was 16, but the air was heavy with the toxicity of the man she was bringing into this sanctuary. "I got lost." I lied, keeping my voice low and unsure. "I went to the store, but I forgot which store. I just drove around." Mallory sighed. She stood up and guided me to the small armchair in the corner. "It is okay, Dad. You are home now. Just sit down. I have to finish packing." I sat. I watched her hands. They were shaking. "Mal," I said, dropping the confused act just a fraction, just enough to sound like a father, not a patient. She paused, looking at me. "Yeah, Dad." "Are you happy?" The question hung in the air. It was simple, yet it carried the weight of everything I knew. She turned back to the suitcase, avoiding my eyes. "Of course I am happy. I am getting married in 3 days. It is what every girl dreams of, right?" I leaned forward. "Dreams don't usually make you shake, honey." She froze. She stood up slowly, her back rigid. "I am just stressed, Dad. Planning a wedding is hard. And, well, worrying about you is hard." I ignored the jab. I needed to push one last time. I needed to see if there was any part of her left that could hear reason, or if Brandon had completely severed the connection between us. "Maybe we should wait," I said. Mallory spun around. Her face was flushed. Wait for what?" "The wedding," I said. "Just a few months. You seem rushed. And Brandon, he seems to have a lot on his mind." "What is that supposed to mean?" she snapped. Her voice was sharp, defensive. It was the voice of a cult member defending the leader. I continued treading carefully on the thin ice. Money is tight. I know he has debts. I saw the letters. I hadn't seen letters. I had seen a digital trail of illegal gambling. But she didn't know the difference. Mallory's eyes narrowed. She took a step toward me. Brandon doesn't have debts, Dad. You are confused. Again. I am not confused about this, I said, letting a bit of my old authority bleed into my tone. A man who loves you doesn't make you cry while you pack for a vacation. A man who is financially stable doesn't need his father-in-law's house to pay off investors. Stop it, she screamed. The sound tore through the room. She was shaking violently now, but not from fear. From anger. You are the one with the problems, Dad. You, Brandon, is a saint for putting up with this. Do you have any idea what he is sacrificing for us? He is taking over your estate because you can't handle it anymore. He is trying to save us from your mistakes. My mistakes? I asked quietly. Yes, she threw her hands up. You forget to pay bills. You leave doors unlocked. Brandon told me about the bad investments you made last year. He told me we are on the brink of losing this house because of you. He is stepping in to fix your mess, and all you do is look at him with those judgmental eyes and make up stories. I sat there stunned. The lie was deeper than I thought. Brandon hadn't just convinced her I was senile. He had convinced her that I was the one who had ruined our finances. He had projected his own failures onto me. He was the one with the gambling debt, but he had told her I was the one making bad investments. He is a liar, Mallory, I said, my voice hardening. He is my husband, she yelled, tears streaming down her face. And he is the only reason you aren't in a state home right now. He fought for you, you dad. He told the doctors we could keep you at home if we just managed the money. He is saving your life and you are too far gone to see it. She walked over to the door and pointed into the hallway. Get out, she whispered. Just get out. I can't look at you right now. You are ruining everything. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the little girl I had taught to ride a bike. I looked at the teenager I had comforted when her first boyfriend broke her heart. That girl was gone. She was buried under layers of manipulation and fear. Brandon had done something worse than steal my money. He had stolen her reality. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked. I didn't need to fake the pain this time. It was real. It was the physical ache of a heart breaking in real time. I realized then that words were useless. Logic was useless. You cannot reason with a disease. You cannot negotiate with a cancer. You have to cut it out. If I continued to argue, she would run to him. She would tell him I was lucid. She would tell him I was suspicious. And he would accelerate the timeline. He would hurt her. I had to be the villain one last time. I slumped my shoulders. I let my face go slack. I let my eyes wander around the room as if I had forgotten where I was. I just wanted to know if you saw my glasses, I mumbled. I can't find my glasses. Mallory stared at me. The anger drained out of her face, replaced by a crushing pity. She reached out and touched the glasses that were sitting on my nose. They are on your face, Dad, she said, her voice trembling. Oh, I said. I touched the frames. So they are. Silly me. I shuffled toward the door. I stopped and looked back at her. I love you, Mal, I said. Remember that. No matter what happens on Monday. Remember that I love you. She turned away, wiping her eyes. Just go to bed, Dad. Please. I walked out into the hallway. I heard her door click shut. Then I heard the muffled sound of sobbing. I walked to my room. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I felt a cold, metallic resolve settle over me. The time for talking was over. The time for saving her feelings was over. She thought I was the monster dragging us down fine. I would be the monster. But I would be the monster that ate the wolf. I went to my desk. I pulled out the power of attorney documents Brandon had left there earlier. They were thick, legal-sized papers that effectively stripped me of my rights as a human being. They gave Brandon Cole full control over my bank accounts, my property, and my medical decisions. I uncapped my pen. Mallory thought she was saving me by siding with him. She was wrong. I was saving her by letting her believe it. I signed my name at the bottom of the page. Douglas A. Bennett. The signature was shaky, just like they wanted, but the intent behind it was lethal. I looked at the document. It was a declaration of war disguised as a surrender. Tomorrow I would hand this to him. I would watch him smile that victorious, arrogant smile. I would watch him think he had won the lottery. And on Monday, I would watch his world disintegrate. I turned off the lamp. I sat in the dark, listening to the rain. Sleep well, Mallory. Cry your tears tonight. Because when the storm breaks on Monday, you are going to need every ounce of strength you have to face the truth. I am not a senile old man. I am a father, and God have mercy on the man who made my daughter cry, because I certainly won't. Saturday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised slate. The rain had stopped, but the air inside the house was heavy, suffocating, charged with the static electricity of imminent betrayal. I sat at the kitchen island, a cup of lukewarm tea in front of me, watching the clock tick toward 9. That was the execution hour. That was when the notary was scheduled to arrive. My hand rested on the granite countertop. It was steady. I spent 5 minutes practicing the tremor, fine-tuning the frequency of the shake so it looked like early-stage Parkinson's, and not just fear. I needed them to believe the body was failing so they wouldn't suspect the mind was sharpening its knives. Brandon walked in first. He was wearing a crisp white dress shirt and navy trousers, the uniform of the successful son-in-law he pretended to be. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale tobacco. He poured himself a coffee, whistling a tune that sounded disturbingly like a funeral march. "Morning, Doug," he said, his voice bright, too loud for the somber occasion. "Big day today." I looked up slowly, blinking behind my thick lenses. "Is it?" I asked, letting my voice crack. "Is it a birthday?" Brandon chuckled, shaking his head as if dealing with a confused toddler. "No, Doug. It is better. It is the day we secure your future. Remember, we talked about this. The paperwork. The nice lady with the stamp is coming to help us." Mallory entered the room a moment later. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were puffy, and she avoided looking at me. She went straight to the coffee machine, her back turned to the room. I could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew this was wrong. Deep down in the part of her soul that Brandon hadn't yet colonized, she knew stripping her father of his rights was a sin. But fear is a powerful silencer. The doorbell rang. The sound made Mallory jump. Brandon's eyes lit up. It was the hunger, the pure, unadulterated greed flashing across his face before he composed himself into a mask of concern. "I will get it," Brandon said, striding to the door. He returned with a woman in a beige raincoat. She was short, efficient, carrying a leather portfolio that looked like a weapon. "Doug, this is Ms. Carver, the notary." Brandon introduced her. "She is here to witness your signature." Ms. Carver looked at me with professional indifference. To her, I was just another old man signing away his autonomy. She had probably seen this scene 100 times, the aging parent, the eager children, the transfer of power. She didn't know she was walking into a crime scene where the crime hadn't happened yet. "Hello, Mr. Bennett," she said, pulling out a stack of documents. "I just need to verify your identity. Do you have a driver's license?" I patted my pockets, frowning. I don't know where I put it. Brandon produced my wallet from his own pocket. He had taken it for safekeeping last night. "Here it is," he said, handing the ID to the notary. She checked the photo. She checked my face. She nodded. "Okay, let's get started. These are the durable power of attorney documents for financial and medical decisions. By signing this, you are granting Mr. Brandon Cole the legal authority to manage your bank accounts, real estate investments, and healthcare choices. Do you understand this, Mr. Bennett? I looked at the stack of papers. It was thick. It was comprehensive. It was a legal cage. I looked at Mallory. She was sitting at the far end of the table staring at her hands. Mal, I whispered. She looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. Do I have to? I asked. It was the question that almost broke her. I saw her waver. I saw her open her mouth to say no to stop this madness. But Brandon was faster. He moved behind my chair, placing both hands on my shoulders. He squeezed. It felt like a massage to the room, but to me it was a vice. It is for the best, Doug, he said, his voice dropping to that hypnotic, reassuring register he used on her. Remember the stove, remember the lost checks. We just want you to be safe. We want you to enjoy your retirement without worrying about the boring stuff. I am going to take care of the bills. I am going to make sure the house is maintained. You trust me, don't you? I looked into his eyes. They were blue, cold, and empty of anything resembling humanity. I trust Mallory, I said softly. Brandon smiled. Exactly. And helping me is helping Mallory. We are a team. He uncapped a heavy, expensive fountain pen. He placed it in my hand. Right here, Doug, next to the yellow sticker. I looked at the line. Grantor signature. This was it. The moment he had been salivating for. The moment he thought he won the lottery. I let my hand hover over the paper. I started the tremor. The pen tip danced above the line, making small ink dots on the paper. I can't keep it steady, I whined. It is okay. Take your time, Ms. Carver said, glancing at her watch. Brandon was vibrating with impatience. I could feel heat radiating off him. He wanted to grab my hand and force the signature, but he couldn't. Not in front of a witness. He had to play the benevolent caretaker. Just breathe, Doug, he said through gritted teeth. Just write DOUG. I took a deep breath. I thought about the text message from the loan shark. I thought about the fake doctor's note. I thought about the insult to my daughter. I lowered the pen. I wrote. The letters were shaky, jagged, the handwriting of a man losing control of his faculties. Douglas A. Bennett. I lifted the pen. There is one more, Ms. Carver said, flipping the page. This is the transfer of the deed for the primary residence into the joint custody of Mr. Cole to be managed on your behalf. I signed that one too. And the access to the brokerage accounts. I signed. With every signature I saw Brandon's shoulders drop. The tension was leaving his body. He was crossing the finish line. He was mentally spending the money already. He was paying off the Russos. He was buying a new car. He was erasing his mistakes with my life's work. Done, Ms. Carver announced. She stamped the papers with a loud rhythmic thud, thud, thud. It sounded like a gavel sentencing him, not me. Brandon snatched the papers up the second she was finished. He didn't even try to hide his eagerness. Thank you, Ms. Carver. I will walk you out. He practically ran her to the door. Mallory stayed in the kitchen. She walked over to me and wrapped her arms around my neck. She was crying silently. I am sorry, Dad, she whispered into my ear. I know you hate this, but it is going to be okay. Brandon promised. He promised everything will be better now. I patted her arm awkwardly. You are a good girl, Mal, I said. You are trying to do the right thing. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. I have to go get ready. The rehearsal is in an hour. Are you coming? I shook my head. I think I will stay here. I need a nap, all this writing. It made me tired. Okay. We will see you at dinner. She kissed my forehead. It felt like a goodbye kiss. she left the room, I heard the front door close. I heard the engine of the BMW roar to life. Brandon was driving fast. He was probably racing to the bank, or to meet his contact, to show them the prize. I sat alone in the kitchen. The silence rushed back in, but it wasn't oppressive anymore. It was clear. It was sharp. I stopped shaking. I picked up the cup of tea and walked to the sink. I poured it out. I walked to the window and watched their car disappear around the bend. Then I pulled out my burner phone. I dialed Patricia. "It is done," I said. "Did he take the bait?" she asked. "Hook, line, and sinker. He has the papers. He thinks he owns the house. He thinks he owns the accounts. He is probably on his way to liquidate the stocks right now. And the timing. Perfect," I said. "He won't be able to do anything until Monday morning when the markets open fully for the type of transfer he needs. He will spend the weekend celebrating. Patricia, execute the shadow trust. Copy that, Doug. Filing the transfer of assets now. We are moving the deed and the brokerage ownership into the Mallory Protection Trust, effective as of, let's say last Tuesday, make it last Monday," I said, "just to be safe." Done. By the time he walks into that bank on Monday, the accounts connected to his power of attorney will be empty shells. He will have the keys to a vault that has already been looted. "And the medical records?" I asked. "I have them," Patricia said. Dr. Meyer's office was surprisingly easy to hack. Or rather, his secretary has a very weak password. We have the emails between him and Brandon. Explicit requests to falsify the dementia diagnosis in exchange for cash. We have the deposit slips. Good. Doug. Patricia hesitated. There is one more thing. What I dug deeper into the Russo connection. The shark contact. I found a police report from 2 years ago. A guy owed them money. He didn't pay, they didn't kill him. They burned his house down while he was at work. They killed his dog. They play dirty, Doug. If Brandon finds out the money is gone, he won't find out until the wedding is over, I said. I will make sure of it. How I am going to keep him busy. I am going to play the confused old man so well he won't have time to check the balance. I am going to ask him for help with everything. I am going to call him every hour. I am going to be the most annoying burden he has ever carried. You are enjoying this, aren't you? I looked at the pen Brandon had left on the table. It was gold-plated, flashy, cheap core, just like him. I am not enjoying it, Patricia. I am executing a sentence. I hung up. I walked into the living room. I looked at the spot where the wedding photos were supposed to hang. I had 48 hours to keep the illusion alive. 48 hours to walk a tightrope over a pit of vipers. But I wasn't afraid. Because now the gun was in my hand, and Brandon Cole had just pulled the trigger for me. I went upstairs to my bedroom. I opened the closet. I pushed aside the old coats and pulled out a small metal box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a digital recorder, a high-fidelity long-range listening device. I had one more scene to play. The rehearsal dinner was tonight. Brandon would be drinking. He would be bragging. And I needed to be there to catch the spillover. I put the recorder in my pocket. I checked my reflection in the mirror. The gray hair was messy. The shirt was buttoned wrong. The glasses were crooked. Perfect. I headed out the door. The victim was dead. The hunter was awake, and the hunt was coming to a close. The Neon Lounge was a pulsing sore on the side of the city's nightlife district. It was the kind of place where the champagne cost $400 a bottle, and the respect for women cost absolutely nothing. The bass from the speakers was so heavy it rattled the fillings in my teeth as I stood on the sidewalk. I checked my watch. It was 11 at night. My bedtime used to be 9:30, but tonight I was on a different schedule. I was on hunter's time. I adjusted my disguise. It was not a fake mustache or a wig. It was much simpler and much more effective. I had untucked my shirt so it hung sloppily over my belt. I had splashed a little cheap whiskey on my collar, enough to create a scent radius of a man who had given up. I let my glasses slide down my nose. I practiced the vacant, watery-eyed stare in the reflection of a parked car window. Perfect. I looked exactly like what I was supposed to be. A confused, drunk, pathetic old man crashing a party he wasn't invited to. I walked past the bouncer. He stepped forward to stop me, his massive arms crossed. "Grandpa, you are lost," he grunted. "Bingo hall is 2 blocks down." I looked at him and slurred my words just enough. "My son is in there. It is his big day. I have his wallet." I held up an old leather wallet I had grabbed from my drawer. It was a prop. The bouncer hesitated. He looked at the wallet, then at my harmless, trembling hands. He shrugged. "Make it quick, Pops. If you throw up, you are cleaning it." He stepped aside. I stumbled in. The heat hit me first. It smelled of sweat, expensive cologne, and desperation. The lights were flashing red and purple, disorienting anyone who wasn't focused. But I was focused. I scanned the VIP booths on the mezzanine level. It didn't take long to find him. Brandon was holding court in the center booth. He was surrounded by 5 other men, all wearing suits that were too tight and watches that were too big. There were bottles of Grey Goose on the table. There were women who looked bored but smiled because they were paid to smile. Brandon looked like a king. He was laughing, his head thrown back, a cigar in one hand and a glass in the other. He looked like a man who had just conquered the world. He had my house deed in his pocket. He had my power of attorney in his safe. He thought he was untouchable. I made my way up the stairs. I bumped into people on purpose. I apologized to a plant. I played the role of the drunk buffoon to perfection. No one looked at me with suspicion. They only looked with pity or annoyance. That is the superpower of the elderly in this society. We are invisible until we are inconvenient. I reached the VIP section. A waiter tried to block me, but I pushed past him, shouting over the music. "Brandon, hey Brandon." The music was loud, but my voice cut through the immediate area. The men in the booth stopped laughing. They turned to look at the intruder. Brandon's smile vanished. His face went pale, then red. He scrambled to his feet, looking around to see if anyone important was watching. "Doug. What the hell are you doing here?" I stumbled forward, opening my arms wide. "I found you. Mallory said you were working late, but I knew you were thirsty." The men around the table burst out laughing. "Who is this, Brandon? Your chauffeur, is this the ghost of Christmas past?" Brandon stepped over the velvet rope, grabbing my arm roughly. He tried to steer me away from his friends, his grip digging into my bicep. "You need to leave, Doug. Now. You are drunk." "I am not drunk," I pulled away, feigning indignation. "I am celebrating. My boy is getting married." I lunged for the table, grabbing a half-empty bottle of vodka. "Let's have a toast to Brandon, the smartest man I know." Brandon snatched the bottle from my hand before I could pour it. He was furious. His veins were bulging in his neck. This was not the cool, collected sociopath he played in front of Mallory. This was the real Brandon. Volatile, embarrassed, weak. "Get him out of here," he yelled at the waiter. But I wasn't done. I needed to get closer. I needed contact. I started to cry. It was a loud, wailing sob that made everyone within 20 feet uncomfortable. "You don't love me," I blubbered, wiping my nose on my sleeve. "I am giving you my house. I am giving you my money. And you won't even have a drink with me." The room went quiet, or as quiet as a club can get. The mention of money and houses piqued the interest of his friends. "Whoa, wait a minute," one of the guys said. "He is giving you a house." Brandon looked panicked. He forced a tight smile. "He is senile, guys. He doesn't know what he is talking about. He thinks it is 1985. I saw my opening. I threw myself at him. It looked like a desperate, sloppy hug from a drunk father. I wrapped my arms around his waist, burying my face in his chest. I love you, son. Please take care of my little girl. She is all I have, Brandon froze. He held his arms out to the side, disgusted, trying not to touch me. Get off me, Doug. Seriously, get off. He pushed me. He shoved me hard. But in that split second of contact, while he was distracted by his own revulsion, my right hand moved. It was a move I had practiced 1,000 times with a sleight-of-hand magician who worked as an informant for the bureau. I slipped the device into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. It was a microtransmitter smaller than a dime with a magnetic clip that would attach to the lining. It clicked into place. He didn't feel a thing. He was too busy trying to peel me off his expensive Italian wool. I stumbled back, letting his shove knock me into a waitress carrying a tray of drinks. The tray flipped. Ice and cranberry juice sprayed everywhere. Chaos erupted. Security. Brandon screamed. Get this old freak out of here. 2 bouncers appeared out of the shadows. They grabbed me by the elbows. I didn't fight. I went limp, letting them drag me toward the exit. I am sorry, I shouted back, still playing the part. I just wanted to say, congratulations. Brandon was brushing off his jacket, furiously checking for stains. He didn't check the inside pocket. Why would he? He thought I was just a clumsy, drunk idiot. The bouncers hauled me down the stairs and threw me out the front door. I landed on the wet pavement, scraping my palm. Stay out, Pops, the bouncer warned, or next time you leave in an ambulance. I lay there for a moment, letting the club door swing shut. I stood up. I brushed the dirt off my pants. I took off my glasses and wiped the rain from the lenses. The drunken slur vanished. The stooped posture straightened. I walked down the block to where I had parked my sedan in a dark alley. I got in and locked the doors. I reached into the glove box and pulled out the receiver unit. I put on the noise-canceling headphones. I turned the dial. Static, then voices. Crystal clear. I had him. I leaned back in the seat, listening. Inside the club, Brandon was trying to recover his dignity. Sorry about that, boys. Brandon's voice came through the headphones. The old man is a loose cannon. Should have put him in the home weeks ago. Don't sweat it. B, one of his friends said. Did he say he gave you a house? Brandon laughed. The sound was ugly. I got him to sign everything this morning. The house, the stocks, the whole portfolio. It is worth $2 million easy. Nice score. So the debt is covered, Brandon scoffed. I'm going to pay off the shark on Monday morning, and I will still have enough left over to buy that Porsche I showed you. What about the girl? The friend asked. Mallory. What about her? Brandon replied. She is clueless. She thinks I am her knight in shining armor. Once the money is secured, I don't need to pretend anymore. If she complains, I will divorce her. Since the assets were transferred to me before the marriage via the power of attorney, I can argue they are my separate property. Or I will just declare the old man incompetent and keep control as his guardian. Either way, I win. I closed my eyes. Hearing it confirmed was different than suspecting it. It was cold. It was calculated. He had planned every step. He had looked at my daughter's love and seen only a transaction code. There is just one problem, another voice said. A deeper voice. I recognized it from the background of his phone calls. It was the shark's enforcer, likely invited to keep an eye on the investment. What problem? Brandon asked, his voice tightening. You better have that cash by noon Monday. The boss is getting impatient. He doesn't like waiting for inheritances. Relax, Brandon said. I have the keys to the kingdom. The old man is done. He is basically a vegetable. Did you see him? He couldn't even stand up straight. He is harmless. I opened my eyes. I looked at the rain streaming down the windshield. Harmless. That is what they always think. They mistake kindness for weakness. They mistake silence for submission. I reached for a notebook and wrote down the timestamp of the confession. 11:42 p.m. Admission of predatory intent. Admission of premeditated divorce and asset stripping. This was not just evidence for a lawsuit. This was evidence for a criminal indictment. I kept listening. They ordered more bottles. They toasted to easy money and stupid in-laws. I let them laugh. I let them celebrate. I had the recording. I had the documents ready to transfer the assets out from under him. And now I had his confession on tape. Monday wasn't going to be a wedding. It was going to be an autopsy. I took off the headphones. My ears were ringing, but my mind was clear. I started the car. I drove home slowly, obeying every traffic law. I needed to get a good night's sleep. I needed to be fresh for tomorrow. Tomorrow was the wedding day. The day I would walk my daughter down the aisle to a man who planned to destroy her. It would be the hardest walk of my life. I would have to smile. I would have to shake his hand. I would have to hand her over. But I knew something he didn't. I wasn't handing her over to a husband. I was handing him over to the executioner. And the executioner was me. The rain hammered against the roof of my sedan like 1,000 nervous fingers tapping on a table. I sat in the dark alley 2 blocks away from the neon lounge. The engine was off to save fuel and reduce vibration. The windows were fogged up from my own breath. To anyone walking past, the car looked empty, abandoned in the urban decay of a Friday night. But inside, the cockpit was alive with the green glow of the receiver unit. I adjusted the noise-canceling headphones over my ears. The world outside, the sirens, the distant traffic, the rain vanished. I was transported into the inner pocket of Brandon Cole's suit jacket. The audio quality was crystal clear. I could hear the rhythmic thumping of the bass from the club floor, muffled now like a heartbeat underwater. I heard the rustle of fabric as he moved. I heard the clink of glass. Then the sound of a heavy door slamming shut. The bass dropped to a dull hum. He had moved to the bathroom. The acoustics changed. There was an echo of tile and porcelain. I heard a sharp intake of breath. A sniff. Then another. Cocaine. He was fueling his confidence with powder. I noted the time on my legal pad. Drug use. Another nail in the custody battle if Mallory ever needed it. But I wasn't here for his vices. I was here for his confession. I heard the tapping of fingers on a screen. He was dialing. The line rang 3 times. It was a burner-to-burner connection encrypted on his end, but he was broadcasting directly to me via the analog bug in his pocket. Technology is only as smart as the user, and Brandon was a fool. "Yeah," a voice answered. It was deep, gravelly, the voice of a man who had smoked too much and cared too little. It was the shark, the enforcer for the Russo family. "It is me," Brandon whispered. His voice echoed slightly in the bathroom stall. "You have some nerve calling me at this hour," the shark growled. "You better be calling to tell me you have the cash." "I have better than cash," Brandon said, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. "I have the keys to the castle. The old man signed everything. I have the power of attorney and the deed transfer in my pocket right now." I pressed the record button on the digital unit, watching the red light blink steady and true. This was it. This was the moment the conspiracy moved from intent to action. "Paper is just paper," Brandon the shark spat. "I can't pay my bosses with a piece of paper signed by a senile geriatric." "It is not just paper," Brandon hissed. "I have a buyer for the house, a cash buyer. We close on Monday morning at 10. The wire hits the account by noon. You will have your 2 million plus the vigorish by 1 o'clock. I wrote it down. Monday, 10 a.m. Intent to sell property not belonging to him, and the rest of the portfolio, the shark asked. Liquidating it. Tuesday, Brandon bragged. I am going to strip it clean. The old man has blue-chip stocks that have been sitting there for 30 years. I am going to sell them all. I closed my eyes, visualizing the portfolio he was talking about. Stocks I had bought when Mallory was born. Stocks meant to pay for her children's college tuition. He spoke about them like they were chips on a roulette table. You better be sure. Brandon, the voice on the line dropped an octave. It became deadly quiet. Because if I look at my account on Monday afternoon and I see zero, I am not coming to your house to talk. I am coming to the wedding reception, and I am going to carve my money out of your bride. I gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles turned white. The threat was explicit. It was recorded. It was admissible. Don't touch her, Brandon said, but his voice lacked conviction. He sounded more worried about the scene it would cause than her safety. You will get your money. Just call off the dogs. I saw a guy watching the house last night. That is insurance, the shark said. He stays until the check clears. Don't do anything stupid, Brandon. Do not try to run. We will find you. And if you try to hide behind the police, we will make sure the girl pays the price before we go down. I am not running, Brandon said. I am winning. I told you. The old man is a vegetable. He doesn't even know what day it is. He thinks I am his best friend. Good, the shark said. Keep him compliant. Make sure he doesn't wake up until the ink is dry. The line clicked dead. I heard Brandon exhale a long, shaky breath. Then I heard him laugh. It was a short, manic giggle. He splashed water on his face. I heard the faucet run. You are a genius, Brandon, he whispered to himself in the mirror. You are a king. He opened the bathroom door, and the bass of the club roared back into the headphones, swallowing his arrogance in noise. I took the headphones off. My ears rang in the sudden silence of the car. I looked at the digital recorder. The file was saved. Evidence_001.wav. I had him. I had him on conspiracy to commit wire fraud. I had him on conspiracy to commit grand larceny. I had him on tape admitting to the premeditated theft of my estate. And most importantly, I had the direct threat against Mallory recorded, which justified every extreme measure I was about to take. But the trap wasn't closed yet. I needed to make sure the floor he was standing on was actually a trapdoor. I picked up my burner phone and dialed Patricia. It was nearly midnight, but I knew she was awake. Lawyers like her don't sleep when there is blood in the water. Talk to me, she answered immediately. He admitted it, I said, my voice calm and level. He is selling the house Monday morning at 10. He has a cash buyer lined up. He is liquidating the stocks on Tuesday. Good, Patricia said. That is the intent. Now let's talk about the reality. I just received the confirmation email from the county clerk's digital filing system. And I asked, holding my breath. The shadow trust is active, she said. Her voice carried a rare note of satisfaction. The deed to your house was officially transferred to the Mallory Protection Trust as of last Monday. The brokerage accounts were retitled on Wednesday. So what does Brandon have in his pocket? I asked, even though I knew the answer. I needed to hear it. Patricia chuckled. He has a power of attorney that grants him control over assets that no longer exist in your name. He has the keys to a safe deposit box that we emptied 3 days ago. When he walks into that closing on Monday, he is going to try to sell a house that belongs to a trust. He has no authority over. That is fraud, I said. That is felony fraud, Patricia corrected. Attempting to sell property you do not own. The moment he signs that sale contract, he commits a federal crime. And since he intends to wire the proceeds to pay a loan shark, that triggers RICO statutes. Money laundering. The trap is set, I said. It is welded shut, Doug. There is no way out for him. What about Dr. Meyer, I asked. I sent the files to the medical board an hour ago, Patricia said, and to the district attorney. They are issuing a warrant for his arrest on Monday morning for falsifying medical records and elder abuse. By the time the wedding cake is cut, the good doctor will be in handcuffs. I looked out at the rain. The city looked different now. It wasn't a dark, scary place. No, it was a grid of justice waiting to be activated. There is one variable, I said. The shark. He has a man watching the house. I know, Patricia said. I have already arranged for a private security detail. Ex-bureau guys. They will be at the wedding. They will be at the reception. If the shark's men show up, they will be neutralized. Quietly. We don't want to ruin Mallory's day until the big reveal. You thought of everything, Patty. I learned from the best, she said softly. You taught me how to hunt, remember I did. Get some sleep, Doug, she said. You have a daughter to give away. I don't plan on giving her away, I said. I plan on getting her back. I hung up. I sat there for a moment longer, listening to the rain. I felt a strange sense of peace. The anger was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was the cold mechanics of execution. Brandon Cole believed he was the protagonist of this story. He believed he was the young, smart wolf taking down the old, sick herd leader. He didn't understand the genre he was in. This wasn't a tragedy about aging. This was a thriller about retribution. He had made the classic mistake of the amateur criminal. He assumed that because I was quiet, I was empty. He assumed that because I was old, I was slow. I started the car engine. The headlights cut through the darkness of the alley, illuminating the rats scurrying near the dumpster. Run, little rats, I thought. Run while you can. I drove home. I pulled into the driveway next to Brandon's empty spot. I walked into the silent house. I went to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. I ate it standing up, staring at the spot on the floor where I had spilled the wine. I cleaned the spot again, scrubbing it until the wood shone. I went upstairs to my room. I laid out my tuxedo for the wedding. I polished my shoes until I could see my reflection in the black leather. The face looking back at me wasn't a victim. It was a judge. I placed the digital recorder on the nightstand next to my bed. It was a small black box, innocuous and boring. But inside it was a thunderbolt waiting to strike. I climbed into bed. For the first time in a week, I didn't stare at the ceiling worrying. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I needed the rest. Because tomorrow I had to play the role of the happy, oblivious father of the bride. I had to shake Brandon's hand. I had to hug him. I had to toast him. I had to walk him to the gallows and make him believe it was a throne. Monday morning broke with a deceptive brilliance. The storm had passed, leaving the Seattle sky a crisp, piercing blue. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Jude's Cathedral, painting the stone floor in pools of crimson and gold. It was the kind of day photographers pray for. It was the kind of day that looks perfect on Instagram and feels hollow in real life. I stood in the vestibule, adjusting my tuxedo. It was the same tuxedo I had worn to my own wedding 40 years ago, let out 2 inches at the waist. Brandon had offered to buy me a new one, a modern, slim-fit thing that would have made me look like a waiter, but I refused. I wanted to wear my own armor. I wanted to wear the clothes of a man who had built a life on honest work, not on Ponzi schemes and stolen inheritances. The organ music swelled a deep, vibrating chord that shook the heavy oak doors. It was the wedding march, but to my ears it sounded like a funeral dirge, and in a way it was. We were about to bury Brandon Cole's life, and he was the only one who didn't know it. Mallory stood beside me. She looked breathtaking. Her dress was a cascade of white silk and lace costing more than my first car. She was trembling. Not the gentle flutter of a nervous bride, but the low-frequency vibration of a woman walking into a cage. She held a bouquet of white roses, her knuckles white around the stems. "Dad," she whispered, not looking at me. Her eyes were fixed on the heavy doors. "Thank you." For what I asked softly. For behaving. For signing the papers. I know you didn't want to. I know you don't like him. But thank you for doing it for me. I looked at her profile. I wanted to shake her. I wanted to scream that the man waiting for her at the altar was a monster who had gambled her safety away in a backroom poker game. But I couldn't. Not yet. The trap required total commitment. If I stopped her now, Brandon would walk away, the Russos would walk away, and the threat would linger over her forever. I had to let the door close so I could lock it. "I am doing this for you, Mal," I said. "You have no idea how much." The doors swung open. The light from the sanctuary hit us. A sea of faces turned to look. I scanned the pews as we began the slow, measured walk down the aisle. On the left, Mallory's friends and family. My sister from Oregon. A few of my old colleagues from the bureau looking uncomfortable in ties. On the right, Brandon's side. It was a gallery of strangers. Men in flashy suits with slicked-back hair. Women with too much filler in their lips. And in the back row, sitting alone near the exit, was a man I recognized from the dossier Patricia had compiled. He was large, wearing a black suit that strained at the shoulders. He wasn't watching the bride. He was watching Brandon. He was the insurance policy the shark had mentioned. He was there to make sure the asset my son-in-law didn't run before the check cleared. Seeing him sent a chill down my spine, but it also steeled my resolve. This was real. The danger was physical. If my plan failed, that man in the back row would be visiting my house tonight. We reached the altar. Brandon stood there looking like the cover of a GQ magazine. He was sweating slightly, a sheen of perspiration on his upper lip that the studio lights couldn't hide. His pupils were dilated. The cocaine from Friday night was still in his system, or maybe he had topped up for courage. He smiled as we approached a wide, predatory grin that showed too many teeth. He stepped forward to take Mallory's hand. This was the handover, the moment of transfer. In the old days, it symbolized the father giving the protection of his daughter to the husband. Today, it felt like handing a lamb to a butcher. I kissed Mallory on the cheek. Her skin was cold. "I love you," I whispered. Then I turned to Brandon. I took his hand. His palm was clammy. He squeezed my hand hard, a final assertion of dominance. He leaned in close, invading my personal space, pretending to give me a respectful embrace. His breath smelled of mints and rot. "Goodbye, Doug," he whispered into my ear. His voice was a hiss, audible only to me. "Try not to drool on the front pew. The nursing home van is coming at reception." He pulled back, winking at me. He thought he was whispering to a senile old man who would forget the insult in 5 minutes. He thought he was untouchable. I held his gaze. I didn't blink. I didn't tremble. I let the corner of my mouth lift in a small, enigmatic smile. "Goodbye, son," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of the man who used to stare down cartel accountants in federal holding cells. For a split second, Brandon looked confused. The clarity in my eyes unsettled him. But then Mallory squeezed his hand, and his ego took back the controls. He turned to the priest, dismissing me as a ghost of the past. I took my seat in the front row. The wood was hard. The ceremony began. The priest, a man who had no idea he was officiating a crime scene, began to speak about love, honor, and cherish. I watched Tanya, the maid of honor. She was standing behind Mallory holding the train of the dress. She was looking at Brandon with a secret, smoldering gaze. They were mocking my daughter right in front of God and everyone. They were planning their life with my money, their affair, their deception. I looked at my watch. It was 10:30. In the real world outside this stone echo chamber, the gears were turning. At this exact moment, Patricia was filing the final motion with the court. At this exact moment, the automated banking system was rejecting the scheduled transfer Brandon had set up. At this exact moment, the district attorney was signing the warrant for Dr. Meyer. Brandon Cole was standing there promising to love my daughter until death did them part, unaware that his financial death had already occurred 30 minutes ago. Do you, Brandon Cole, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Brandon said. His voice boomed. It was the voice of a man claiming a prize. Do you, Mallory Bennett, take this man? I held my breath. Part of me hoped she would run. Part of me hoped she would see the shadow behind his eyes. I do, she whispered. The priest smiled. He looked out at the congregation. If anyone here has any just cause why these two may not be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel the weight of the truth sitting in my chest pocket where the digital recorder lay. I could have stood up. I could have played the tape. I could have stopped the wedding right there. But that would have been messy. That would have been emotional. Brandon would have claimed the tape was doctored. He would have claimed I was crazy. The guests would have been confused. The Sharks man in the back row might have pulled a gun. No. The humiliation had to be total. It had to be undeniable. It had to happen when he felt safest. I remained seated. I remained silent. I saw Brandon's shoulders relax. He had passed the final hurdle. He thought he was safe. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the priest declared. You may kiss the bride. Brandon grabbed Mallory and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of affection. It was a kiss of ownership. It was aggressive, theatrical, designed to show the world that she belonged to him now. The audience applauded. The sound washed over me like a wave. They walked back down the aisle, arm in arm. Brandon was beaming. He pumped his fist in the air. He looked at the Sharks man in the back row and gave a subtle nod. It's done. I have the girl, I have the money. The enforcer didn't smile. He just checked his phone and walked out. I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was light. The ceremony was over. The legal trap was sprung. Now came the reception, the toasts, the speeches, and the reveal. I walked out of the church into the blinding sunlight. Guests were lining up to throw rice. Everyone was laughing. Everyone was happy. I walked over to the limousine. I saw Brandon helping Mallory inside. He looked at me one last time before closing the door. He didn't say anything, but his expression screamed it. Checkmate, old man. I got into my own car. I checked the display on my phone. One new message from Patricia. The accounts are frozen. The sheriff is en route to the reception hall. ETA 45 minutes. I started the engine. Enjoy the ride, Brandon, I said to the empty car. It is the last time you will ever sit in a limousine without handcuffs. I pulled out into traffic following the white ribbon of the just-married car. The funeral procession had begun. The reception hall at the Grand Meridian was a cavern of crystal and silk. Centerpieces of white orchids stood like sentries on every table, towering over plates of filet mignon that cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the metallic tang of chilled champagne. To the untrained eye, it was a fairy tale. To me, it was a crime scene waiting for the yellow tape. I sat at the head table, the father of the bride invisible in plain sight. To my left, Mallory picked at her food, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously toward the exit. To my right, Brandon was holding court. He had loosened his tie. He was drinking scotch now, amber liquid sloshing in heavy crystal. He was high on adrenaline, high on victory, and likely high on the chemical courage he had snorted in the bathroom 10 minutes ago. He leaned over to me, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Great party, Doug," he said, his voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "You really outdid yourself. Don't worry about the bill. I will handle everything on Monday." He winked. It was a conspiratorial wink, the gesture of a man who believes he has just successfully robbed a bank and is buying the security guard a drink. I smiled back. It was the smile of the executioner adjusting the hood. "I am glad you are enjoying it, son," I said. "You should savor it." He laughed, turning back to his best man to crack a joke about the bridesmaids. He didn't hear the warning. They never do. The band leader, a man in a white tuxedo, tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice smooth as velvet. "If I could have your attention, it is time for the father of the bride to give his toast. Please welcome Mr. Douglas Bennett." Applause rippled through the room. It was polite, obligatory applause. They expected a few mumbled words from the old man, maybe a teary memory about Mallory's childhood, and then a toast to the happy couple. They wanted me to be brief so they could get back to the open bar. I stood up. My legs felt like steel. I buttoned my tuxedo jacket. I walked to the small stage in the center of the room, taking the microphone from the stand. I held a small remote control in my left hand concealed against my palm. The room went silent. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Tanya, the maid of honor, applying lipstick at table 2. I saw the Sharks' enforcer, sitting in the back corner, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on Brandon. I saw my daughter looking up at me with a mixture of love and dread, praying I wouldn't embarrass her. I took a deep breath. Friends, family, and distinguished guests, began my voice steady and clear. The microphone amplified the grit in my tone. We are gathered here to celebrate a union. A marriage is more than just a ceremony. It is a merger. It is the combining of 2 lives, 2 histories, and 2 futures. I paused. I looked directly at Brandon. He was leaning back in his chair, swirling his scotch, looking bored. When I first met Brandon, I continued. I asked myself the question every father asks. Is this man worthy? Does he have the integrity to protect my daughter? Does he have the honesty to build a life with her? Brandon smirked, raising his glass in a mock salute. For months I have been told that I am losing my touch, I said, letting a slight tremor enter my voice, playing the part one last time. I have been told that I am forgetful, that I am confused, that I am living in the past. A few guests chuckled uncomfortably. Mallory looked down at her lap. But the thing about the past, I said, my voice hardening, dropping the tremor completely, is that it always leaves a paper trail. And the thing about being a forensic accountant for 30 years is that you never lose the ability to spot a fraud. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The chuckles died. Brandon stopped swirling his drink. He sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing. I raised the remote control. I wanted to give the happy couple a gift, I said. A tribute to the truth. Because a marriage built on secrets is like a house built on sand. And Brandon, you have built a castle on a swamp. I pressed the button. The massive projection screen behind me, which had been displaying a loop of engagement photos, flickered. The image changed. It was not a photo. It was a video. Grainy black and white, time-stamped 3 days ago. It was the security footage from Elena's bridal shop. Elena had installed high-definition cameras in the viewing area years ago to catch shoplifters. She had given me the footage on Friday. The angle was high, looking down into the fitting area. The curtain of the changing room was partially open. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. On the screen, Brandon and Tanya were clearly visible. They were not trying on clothes. They were entangled in a way that left nothing to the imagination. Mallory's hands flew to her mouth. She made a sound like a wounded animal. But I didn't stop there. I pressed the button again. The audio from the club kicked in, synced over the video. Is everything set for Monday? Tanya's voice boomed through the high-quality speakers of the reception hall. Done and dusted, Brandon's voice replied, arrogant and clear. As soon as I say I do, I gain power of attorney. I have been working on Mallory for months. She is convinced Doug is losing his mind. Pandemonium threatened to erupt, but my voice cut through it like a whip. Sit down, I roared into the microphone. I am not finished. Brandon had jumped to his feet. He was white as a sheet. Turn it off, he screamed, looking at the AV technician. Turn it off. The technician didn't move. I had paid him $500 to lock the system. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed. This time it was a spreadsheet. Rows of red numbers, bank logos, wire transfers. This is Brandon's financial reality, I narrated, walking the audience through the autopsy of his life. You all think he is a CEO. The truth is, Brandon Cole is unemployed. The company Apex Horizon is a shell. These documents show over $2 million in debt to illegal gambling rings. I pointed to a specific line item highlighted in yellow on the screen. Viper Logistics. That is not a shipping company, folks, I said, locking eyes with the enforcer in the back of the room. That is the collection arm of the Russo crime family. Brandon looked at the back of the room. He saw the enforcer stand up. The color drained from his face so completely he looked like a corpse. He is lying! Brandon shouted, his voice cracking. He is senile. He photoshopped this. I clicked the remote again. A text message appeared on the screen, the one I had photographed from his phone. 200,000 by Monday, or the girl gets it. The room went deadly silent. The horror of the threat sank in. Mallory stood up. She looked at Brandon. She looked at the screen. She looked at me. The realization washed over her, the rush to get married, the pressure to sign the papers, the gaslighting about my memory. It wasn't love. It was a hostage negotiation. You monster, she whispered. I am not done, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifying calm. I turned to Brandon. He was looking for an exit, but the security team I had hired, 4 ex-bureau agents, had quietly blocked the doors. You thought you won, Brandon. You thought you were smart. You made me sign a power of attorney yesterday. You made me sign over the deed to my house. You thought you were going to sell my home tomorrow morning to pay off your debt. I clicked the remote one last time. A legal document filled the screen. It was stamped, notarized, and filed. The Mallory Protection Trust. Status irrevocable. Effective date 7 days ago. I turned to look at him. You have a power of attorney, Brandon. That is true, but a power of attorney only allows you to manage assets that I own. I stepped off the stage and walked toward him. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I don't own the house anymore, I said. I don't own the stocks. I don't own the bank accounts. I transferred every single penny into this trust a week ago. Brandon's mouth opened and closed. He looked at the document on the screen. He looked at the date. But you signed, he stammered. I signed a piece of paper that gave you the keys to an empty vault, I said, stopping inches from his face. You are holding the title to nothing. You are the legal guardian of a ghost. I leaned in close so only he and Mallory could hear. You are insolvent, Brandon. You have no money to pay the shark tomorrow. And since you just married my daughter under false pretenses with the intent to defraud, the prenuptial protections of the state don't apply to criminal activity. But the trust does. The trust protects her. It protects the house. It protects everything from your creditors. Brandon looked at the back of the room. The enforcer was taking out his phone, making a call. The look on the enforcer's face said everything. The deal was off. The hunting season was open. You set me up, Brandon whispered, tears of panic welling in his eyes. You killed me. They are going to kill me. I didn't kill you, I said coldly. I just refused to let you use my daughter as a human shield. I turned to Mallory. She was standing there, shaking, tears streaming down her face, her beautiful dress looking like a shroud. I reached out a hand. Come here, Mal. Brandon grabbed her arm. It was a reflex, a desperate attempt to hold on to his leverage. She is my wife, he shouted. She stays with me. I didn't have to move. Mallory turned on him. The slap echoed through the silent hall like a gunshot. It was harder than the one Juliet gave her mother-in-law in that other story. It was the slap of a woman waking up from a nightmare. "Don't you touch me," she screamed. "You sold me! You sold me to the mob!" She ripped her hand away from him and stepped to my side. I put my arm around her. I felt her trembling against my ribs. I looked at Brandon, who was standing alone, surrounded by the ruins of his lies. The video on the screen was still playing on a loop, him laughing with Tanya about putting me in a nursing home. Tanya was gone. I saw the back of her dress disappearing into the kitchen. She knew when a ship was sinking. Brandon looked around the room. His mother was crying. His friends were looking at their shoes. The Shark's enforcer was walking toward the exit. His job done, his report filed. Brandon fell into his chair. He put his head in his hands. I looked at the AV technician and dragged a finger across my throat. "Cut it." The screen went black. The lights came up. The fairy tale was officially over. But we weren't done yet. The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder with every second. I looked at Brandon. "I told you, son," I said, my voice carrying over the murmuring crowd. "I told you I would take care of everything. And I have." I checked my watch. Patricia was right on time. The double doors at the back of the hall burst open. But it wasn't the caterers with the dessert. It was the sheriff, flanked by 2 federal agents in windbreakers. Brandon looked up. He saw the badges. For a moment he looked relieved. He thought the police were better than the mob. He thought he was safe in a cell. He was wrong. Because I hadn't just called the police for the fraud. I had given them something much darker. I watched the officers march across the dance floor, their boots thudding on the polished wood. The reception was over. The sentencing was about to begin. The doors to the banquet hall did not just open. They were breached. The sheriff walked in first, his hand resting on his belt, followed by 2 federal agents wearing jackets emblazoned with the letters FBI. The music had stopped long ago, but the silence now was heavy enough to crush a man. Brandon stood near the head table. He looked small. The arrogance that had fueled him for months, the cocaine that had spiked his confidence, the adrenaline of the wedding, it all evaporated in an instant. He was left standing there as exactly what he was: a fraud, a gambler, a thief. Brandon Cole, the sheriff, announced, his voice carrying to the back of the room without a microphone. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse." Brandon stumbled back, knocking over a crystal vase. Water and orchids spilled onto the dance floor. "This is a mistake," Brandon stammered, holding his hands up. "It is a prank. Doug put you up to this. Tell them, Doug. Tell them it is a joke." I stood still. I watched him. I did not blink. The sheriff stepped forward. He pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. The metal caught the light of the chandeliers. "We have your text messages, Mr. Cole. We have the wire transfer attempts. And we have the testimony of Dr. Alan Meyer, who was taken into custody 40 minutes ago. He gave us everything in exchange for a plea deal." Brandon's knees gave way. He didn't fall gracefully. He collapsed like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The agents hauled him up. They didn't fracture his ribs, but they weren't gentle. They spun him around and slammed him against the table where the wedding cake stood, a 5-tier monument to a lie. "You have the right to remain silent," the agent recited. Brandon was sobbing now. It was an ugly, wet sound. He looked at Mallory. "Baby, please tell them I did it for us. I did it so we could be rich." Mallory did not look at him. She stared at the wall, her face a mask of shock. The agent clicked the cuffs shut. That sound, the sharp final click of ratcheting steel, was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. It was the period at the end of a long, terrible sentence. But we weren't finished. I pointed toward the service entrance near the kitchen. "Don't forget the accomplice," I said calmly. Tanya was trying to slip away. She had ditched her bouquet and was inching toward the exit, trying to blend in with the catering staff. An agent moved to intercept her. He blocked her path with the solidity of a wall. "Going somewhere, Ms. Miller?" he asked. Tanya froze. Her face was pale, her lipstick smeared. "I didn't do anything," she shrilled. "I was just the maid of honor. You are on the tape, Tanya," I said from across the room. "You conspired to defraud an estate. You knowingly participated in a scheme to falsify medical records, and you are an accessory to the attempted theft of $2 million. "No!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Brandon. "It was his idea. He forced me. He said he would pay off my student loans." Brandon twisted in the grip of the agents. "You traitor! You begged me to cut you in!" They screamed at each other as they were dragged out. The bride and groom of the underworld turning on each other before they even reached the squad car. The guests watched in horrified fascination. Phones were out. The live stream was probably trending already. The reputation of the Cole family was incinerated in real time. I walked over to Mallory. She was standing alone in the center of the dance floor. She looked at her hands. She looked at the ring on her finger, a ring paid for with credit card debt that was now undoubtedly in default. She pulled it off. She didn't throw it. She just dropped it. It hit the floor with a dull ping and rolled away under a table. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice was broken. "I am here, Mal." She looked up at me. Her eyes were red, but the fog was gone. The manipulation had broken. She saw me. She saw the father who had protected her, not the enemy Brandon had painted. He was going to sell the house, she said, her voice trembling. He was going to give the money to the mob. And if he didn't... She couldn't finish the sentence. She realized how close the shark had been to the water. I took off my tuxedo jacket. I draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy and warm. "It is over," I said. "The house is safe. The money is safe. You are safe." She buried her face in my chest and wept. It was a deep guttural cry, the sound of a heart shattering and reforming all at once. I held her. I let her cry. I glared at anyone who dared to approach. This was not a spectacle for their amusement. This was a rescue operation. "Let's go," I said. I steered her toward the exit. We walked past the staring guests. We walked past Brandon's mother, who was sobbing into a napkin, realizing her son was not a prodigy, but a felon. We walked past the uneaten dinner. Outside, the air was cool and clean. The flashing lights of the police cruisers painted the driveway in strokes of red and blue. I saw Brandon being shoved into the back of a car. He saw us. He pressed his face against the window, shouting something I couldn't hear. I didn't look back. He was in the rearview mirror now, literally and metaphorically. I opened the door of my sedan for Mallory. She slid in, pulling the white dress inside, gathering the silk around her like a shield. I got into the driver's seat. I started the engine. The drive home was silent. We passed the spot where the Shark's enforcer had been parked earlier. The car was gone. The threat had evaporated the moment Brandon was in custody. The Russos knew the game was over. They would write off the debt as a loss and move on. Brandon would deal with them in prison, where debts are paid in blood, but that was no longer my concern. We pulled into the driveway of our home. The house looked different tonight. It wasn't just a building. It was a fortress that had held. I helped Mallory out of the car. She looked at the front door. "I am sorry, Dad," she said again. "I was so stupid." "You weren't stupid," I said firmly. "You were in love, and he used that against you. Evil people rely on the decency of others to succeed. You are decent. He is not. Never apologize for having a heart. Just learn to guard it better next time." We walked inside. I locked the door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was the sweetest music I had ever heard. I went to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water. I handed one to her. "What happens now?" she asked, staring into the glass. "Now," I said, "we call a lawyer to annul the marriage. Since it was based on fraud, it will be as if it never happened. You are not a divorcee, Mallory. You are a survivor." She nodded slowly. A small, tentative strength was returning to her eyes. And then I continued. "We are going to plant a garden. I think the backyard needs some new roses." She smiled. It was a weak smile, but it was real. "You are a scary man, Dad," she said softly. "I had no idea you could do all that." I took a sip of water. I looked at the reflection in the window. The old man was back. The glasses were slid down my nose. The shoulders were slumped. The dangerous agent had retreated back into the shadows, waiting until he was needed again. "A father does what he has to do," I said. "I am Doug Bennett. I am 68 years old. People look at me and see a retiree. They see a widower. They see an easy target. Let them look. Let them underestimate. Because the wolf doesn't need to howl to be dangerous. Sometimes he just needs to wait in the dark." If you enjoyed this story, if you believe that justice is a dish best served cold and calculated, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of people who refused to be victims. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to protect someone who didn't know they were in danger? I will see you in the next story. Until then, check your locks, check your accounts, and never ever assume the old man in the corner isn't listening.